Hey friend, welcome to another part in this series about programming problems. This time around we will look at something called two numbers, so let's try to explain what that is. Well, if you have a list of numbers like so, you have the following number values in the list, 2, 7, 11 and 15, and then you also have a target number that you're trying to hit. Because what we want an answer to is, can I find two such numbers in this list that it sums up to this target? Well, 2 and 7 actually sums up to 9, so that is our answer. And as part of this problem also is that there should only be one solution, so that's one constraint that this problem had, or a simplification if you will. What we aim to respond with though is not the values themselves that sums up, but rather their position. So here we are answering with 0 and 1, because we are seeing the following. We're seeing that this is on position 0, we see that the 7 is on position 1, so that's a correct way of responding. Now, how do we attempt to solve this problem? Well, first of all, we need to recognize that there might be some sub-problems that we need to approach in order. And a way to do this is, if you think about it this way, as a developer, you are expected to take one big complicated problem and slice that up into smaller problems so that each problem can be conquered. We sometimes refer to this principle as divide and conquer, even though that's a term being used when it comes to algorithms, so let's not confuse that much. But know this, take a big complicated problem, divide it up, which is exactly what you need to tell your interviewer. I'm seeing the problem consisting of these two chunks. So what chunks? Well, subproblem 1, what two pieces need to fit together? That means that we need to identify a target, that's our sum, and also what one half of this problem would be target minus number, our number that we're currently on, that would be one half, and the second half would be the number itself that we're on. So imagine now that num is 2, for example, then target minus 2, in this case 9 minus 2 is 7, so that means that our other half here would be 7, and this half would be 2. So that's a way to express that, okay, I have a sub-problem. So how do I start implementing that in code? Well, for one, you want to declare a method, we call it two numbers. You want to send the target value into this function. You also want to send an array of numbers that you need to check. And then you want to loop through that array for each number. And as I said here with subproblem 1, you want to identify the halves that will make out your completed sum. So this is one half and this is the other half, right? So this one is defined as target minus num, which if target was 9, this would be 7, given of course that our num is 2. So what we're trying to do now is to identify the half. The other bit, the other subproblem that we need to recognize is the fact that we can't just return the values themselves, but rather their index. We need to find a way to translate that index, to translate that value into an index. Fortunately for us, because we're using Python, there's an index method that gives you the index for a specific number. So what we end up doing is, if we're saying that other half is actually in the array, so at this point we're saying, given that we have number and given that we have the other half, that means that we have two halves that make our target. We are saying, let's locate the index for this one and for this one, our two halves. And then we append those to this array. And given an array then of 1, 2, 4 and 8 and a target value of 6, that means that it should respond with the position for 2 and 4. So if we try to run that, we get positions 1 and 2. So that is position 1, that is position 2, so that checks out. Should we change this target value, for example, to 3, it should respond with 0 and 1, because that is the positions for 1 and 2 that makes out 3 together if we sum them up. So 0 and 1, that's great. What if we gave it a target of 5? Is there something in this list that makes out 5? Well, in fact there is. There's 1 and there's 4. But 1 and 4 are on position 0 and 2, so that also checks out. What if we take something that we definitely can't get? let's take something like 15. Is that possible to get? 12, 14, 15, no, 16. We know that 16 is not something that we're able to sum up to. So we seem to have located a bug. If I send in the target value of 16, if we go through our algorithm and try to deduce what happened, because this is a learning moment for us, this is definitely something that the interviewer would expect you to handle. They see that there's a bug in the program, and you are expected to examine your algorithm and come up with a solution, or at least an explanation why this happens. So if you send in target 16, that means that this is technically not a bug, and you know why? Because it's answering you with 3 and 3, and 3 is the very last position. That means it's taking 8 twice, and if you look at the implementation here, you're seeing that the index method is looking for the 2 halves, and it's actually giving you the same index twice. So unless the interviewer is telling you, hey, you can't use the same index twice, this is actually a valid solution, because it's correct, because 8 plus 8 actually amounts to 16. Now, if he's saying it needs, or he or she says this can be 2 different numbers, or should be 2 different numbers, you need to add a check here, and that's an important bit to add. So what you would need then, if your interviewer tells you, well, this needs to be 2 different numbers, you need to first store these numbers, and you need to add a condition that says if they are actually one and the same, then we do continue, instead of actually appending these values to our list and breaking. So if we've now added this check where we clearly say this index cannot be the same, it needs to be 2 different positions in our array, let's see what happens. And you end up with saying that there's no solution. So yeah, that's definitely something that you can expect, that your interviewer will add rules as we go along. But let's try to summarize up this problem, because we have now solved it even with an added condition. Try to divide, try to see the sub-problems, and also try to explain the problem out loud so the interviewer knows that you correctly are receiving the information, because sometimes we start coding away on something and we have misunderstood the premise. So I would actually say that as step 1. Repeat what the interviewer is saying with your own words and make some assumptions. If they notice that you are getting it wrong, that you're misunderstanding the problem, there are no minus points for misunderstanding. It's their job to actually tell you how you should interpret the problem. So yeah, talk about loud what the problem is, then try to define and give yourself a few seconds or even up to a minute and say these are the sub-problems, and then try to implement the sub-problems little by little till you come up with a solution. And also, if what happens here, the interviewer is adding this condition and telling that the indexes needs to be different, then you need to also take a step back, don't panic, think about the solution, and slowly come to a way to implement it. So yeah, I hope that this video was useful, not only for the code I showed you, but the process. So if you like videos like this, I would very much appreciate a like, a comment, if you think it should be improved, or just saying, hey, good job. And I would very, very much appreciate a subscribe. So I hope I see you in the next part in this interview series.